Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Frank, for having me back again this year. These are my disclosures related to this talk. Now, the Cook arch branch device has some specific dimensions for its use. Proximal diameter is 34 to 46, and you see each of the branches have their own individual diameter, and it does have preloaded catheters if you desire to use them for the case. Now, one of the reasons that we've moved and considered three-branch devices is that the carotid subclavian bypasses, when performed for aortic disease and not-occlusive disease, does have some complications. It's not without risk. And here you see in 112 patients, they mainly use PTFE. Long-term patencies very well, but the complications are reported there is 25% phrenic nerve injury, and then late complications, 21% anastomotic pseudoaneurysms. So really, there's been a move to consider the subclavian as a branch component, and part of that is because we now have some data based on single branch devices that the retrograde branch does provide a good perfusion to the arm, and we don't see complications related to that branch for the most part in the current devices that are being used by and large. So most of the considerations when we talk about arch branches deal with the ascending aorta. We need a diameter that's less than 38 millimeters. Otherwise, there's an increased risk of dissection. We need a sufficient length. Patients with a history of dissections do increase the risk of having complications. Obviously, there's a stroke risk by the number of calcifications and atheroma in the arch. Previous coronary bypasses, mechanical valves, and the actual great vessels need some good landing zones. You see the anatomic criteria there for the arch branch device from Cook. Now, whether we do a double or a triple branch really depends upon your approach and the individual patient aspect. So the pros of a triple branch is there's no cervical debranching. You can have antegrade branches for the innominate and retrograde for the left carotid. Now we have actually done retrograde for all three branches. I'm not a big proponent of that, but it is possible. Potential for total percutaneous technique has been shown to be feasible. The downsides are sequential arch manipulations. It's less forgiving for the ascending aorta if there are kinks, and obviously wound complications from the cervical incisions for the debranchings is something you need to consider for your patients. The clinical determination of the device selection really depends on our first choice is typically a three-vessel with the retrograde, carotid, and subclavian. But the two vessels can be used when you have occlusions of those vessels, bovine trunks with small origins, or other critical anatomy for those cases. But device selection is often determined by the clinical and anatomic factors of the patient for the most part. Now, the multi-center global feasibility study was reported out several years ago by Emmanuel Tenorio, and this is about 3 years ago now, 39 patients with three-vessel in-arch graft. As you see, 100% technical success, bilateral open carotid access in 35% of the patients, RVP in 27%. If you look at the 38 outcomes, which goes along with what Tony Estrella was talking about, in-hospital mortality 5%, stroke 5%, technical success 100%. You have to realize the majority of these patients were dissection patients and not atheromatous degenerative aneurysms for the most part. Now, the Achilles heel of that we noticed in that study was that the access complications were not insignificant, and you see the number of secondary interventions mainly derived by the great vessels that need a good landing zone, and so we need to be cognizant of that when we do these procedures to make sure that done. And this is probably the move in the last 3 years that we've gone to more of a percutaneous approach in retrograde branches to avoid some of those cervical incisions. What are the other things you have to be careful about? Well, position of the wire in the ventricle. You have to make sure it doesn't get underneath one of the papillary muscles because you can rupture that in chordae tendineae, and that's a problem for the patient, and you have acute issues you have to deal with. And so you need to watch that when you're doing these cases. What about the deployment? You need to typically use RVP. There are different approaches now. You can deploy an RVP over the main wire, or you can use a separate system up in the right ventricle to do it. Just depends on your particular approach. Avoiding stroke, I know Tilo's in the room. He's the one that really needs to be credited with bringing this to all of our attention and modernizing this with limited manipulations and air embolization using CO2 flushing when you're working in the arch. And anytime we're in the upper third of the thoracic aorta, not even in the arch, we do CO2 flushing. There are some anesthetic considerations that you need to be aware of, and so we've added this manuscript to the literature to help those people. So in conclusion, significant anatomic and case planning details are critical in obtaining optimal outcomes for patients with arch disease. Multi-specialty approach is often necessary, and descending in arch endovascular repair is expanding to more centers in the U.S. as we gain more and more experience. Thank you.